Yo, what's up, guys? WQQQQWRT here. Now, feel free to just call me WQ or call me Oliver as well. That's my real name. Anyway, this is number one. First day, first week of the WQ Premium Success membership. It's called The Natural World. That's because we're primarily going to be talking about natural gameplay philosophy. There's going to be a lot of philosophy and logical discussion in this group. We're also focused on motivation and improving gameplay, and also how this ties into other things. Because something that's interesting about gameplay, a lot of it is around behaviors and getting your behaviors to align with what's good and align with what you want to do. And so that actually does work with other aspects of life, like relationships and motivation and skill development. So we're really going to be focusing on that as well. Now, guys, if you have not upgraded to the $20 tier, make sure to do that. You get official access to the Discord. You get access to the live streams and Q&A sessions. So make sure to upgrade to that. It's a big deal. It's a big deal, gamers. But at any rate, let's start our very first discussion on an important topic that this is the most important skill to cultivate, thing to learn in gameplay over a long period of time. Okay, guys, so the number one most important thing to learn in gameplay or skill development over a long period of time is value systems, is correctly learning value systems, learning how value systems affect your gameplay, and understanding how to manipulate and abuse this to correctly learn the gameplay feed over a long period of time. Okay, so what a value system is within a game in gameplay is what has value, where is value within the game, and then finding that, highlighting it, and figuring out what actually has value in a game. That's how you can get better at this value system thing. But let's go into a little bit more in depth into exactly what a value system is. Okay, guys, the first thing to learn, and so this is a philosophy discussion group, and we're doing gameplay philosophy, and the reason I call it that is because it's a lot of thinking, it's a lot of critical thinking, and it's around this idea called gameplay that I kind of coined. I'm kind of coining myself, and we're using critical thought in order to figure out, figure out value within gameplay, right? So I think it's interesting because we're also doing that within games, right? We're using philosophy and thought to figure out value within what has value, right? So it's like a two-layer thing. So this is why this is so important as well. So number one rule: value is always determined by the game's metrics. So this is actually very interesting and vital because you don't quite have this in the philosophy part. Like, where exactly is value? If I'm trying to figure out what the right things to think, because effectively, if you do follow my YouTube videos, which we will cover this in the future, the fundamental what I used to call a layout or like a model of gameplay, your behaviors are rooted from your understanding. So, if you think a certain way, you'll get an output. You get a set of output behaviors, and those output behaviors are going to determine what happens or what you do, what kind of results you get, and you're trying to get better results. So how can you think differently so that you can think better, so that you can succeed more? And what we're going to do with that is where does the value come from? Well, it's harder to say like, oh, this has value, this doesn't have value. But within a video game, and this is one reason I really like video games, especially speedrunning, because speedrunning is very concrete, it's very simplified. But yeah, you look at the game's metrics for success, for winning. So oftentimes, like, let's look at a speed run. In a speed run, it's man-made, it's arbitrary, but you still have a general goal, which is really helpful. So let's look at speedrunning. The goal, for example, is a player's PB, and it's completely arbitrary. Like, why would completing a game one frame faster than someone else or than you previously did have any value? Or like, why would that matter at all? Like, why does that mean anything, right? It's completely man-made, it's completely arbitrary, but it's a very good tool, a very good technique for determining value within a game. And in a lot of games, or in certain games, you can actually due to the mechanics or the physics or the rules that are set up, you can actually start to see skill differentiation. It's really cool, and it's also why speedrunning is so fundamental and so valuable for gameplay discussion like this. So in League of Legends, the goal would be to destroy the opponent's nexus. This is a lot less arbitrary. It's built into the game. Once you destroy an opponent's nexus, you automatically win. I've never seen a tie. I'm pretty sure two teams cannot tie. I feel like it would have happened by now. But yeah, so it's like, I think that's still technically arbitrary. Like, what if arbitrarily the rules were to get first blood? It's like kill the opponent before he kills you the first time. That's what first blood means. And then you win the tournament, right? So that would still be that would still be like a justification for a rule set, and you would create different values. Now that would be more arbitrary. That's why I say destroying the opponent's nexus is still technically arbitrary, but at least within the game's coding, it has a pretty clear objective. So Melee SSBM, that game's kind of in the middle where KOing the opponent is like the objective. That's the goal. But I would say it's both like arbitrary and non-arbitrary. Now, personally, I think all evaluations of rules, all goals, all metrics within games are arbitrary. But I think some like League of Legends and Melee are a lot less arbitrary than speedrunning. But I still think they're technically still arbitrary. And I want to say like Melee is kind of in the middle, because in Melee the rules are man-made. Like, you have to beat the opponent in a 1v1 with no items on only these few specific stages, and you have to do it twice. And the reason that, like, well, that seems kind of reasonable, right? But if you tie an opponent, the standard rule set for tournaments is that it comes down to who had more percent. So that's not how the game's code actually runs. The game's code would go to sudden death. And then why would even 1v1 with no items be like the ultimate test of skill? So that's kind of why I think any goal is arbitrary, but at the same time, you have pretty clear, it's like pretty obvious. Like in League of Legends, I think it's very obvious. It's like, okay, well, this is a goal. There's one thing here, there's one goal. Now, let's look at League of Legends. So if you don't know what League of Legends is, it's like a super popular 5v5 game. You go to a battlefield and you queue up. It's called solo queue. Now there's a ladder, which means you can, if you win a game, you get like matchmaking rating. It's called MMR. It's called ELO, and you're trying to get rank 1 on the ladder. That's like one of the mini goals. So a lot of times in League of Legends, the goal isn't even really to destroy the Nexus. It's to get rank 1 on the ladder, or get a higher rank on the ladder. So sometimes somebody say, okay, I just want to get Diamond, or I just want to get Challenger, or I just want to get rank 1. To a professional player, getting rank 1 on the ladder is kind of irrelevant. It doesn't matter. And you would have different skills and different goals if you're trying to get rank 1 on the ladder, as if you're trying to win world championship. Like, those are completely different things. And that matters a lot, because what has value within the game does change a lot. So a lot of getting good at a game is figuring out what the goals are, be very clear about that, and then attack the value system. And something that I specifically want you guys to really address and really understand is that when you look at a game's value system and you look at the own game's metrics, you have to be very clear about, or you have to be very honest with yourself about what has value and what doesn't have value. So in a speedrun, oftentimes you'll see people do like swag stuff because it's cool or fun, but what value does have a swag have in a speedrun, right? If you look at the game's metrics, and now our arbitrary rules are to do it faster, swag is contradictory towards this. So if you're doing swag, you might feel good about yourself or something, but that means you're a worse player. If you're doing that, it literally just means you're a worse player. And it's not my opinion. It's not anybody's opinion. And it's not something you can say, oh no, I just do it sometimes. That's not how gameplay works. That's not how this works. You get a worse time, you're a worse player. That's like one of these clear rules at the end of the day. So it's very important to understand the game's value and be very honest about that. And the more honest you are about it and the more serious you take it, the better your results are going to be. Okay, we're on point number 2 now, learning a game's value system. It scales over a long period of time. This is ridiculously important, because if you're trying to get incredibly good at a game now, guys, let's look at what does skill come down to, let's look at it from a more objective stance or more objective standard. It oftentimes, now I'm not going to say it completely comes down to a numbers game, but yeah, you could argue gameplay always comes down to a numbers game. If you get the more numbers than the opponents, you always win. This is like objectively true. Doesn't matter. Nothing else matters, right? So I think it's a fair argument. Now, if we keep that in mind, a lot of times, or like pretty much virtually always, you're just trying to get your numbers better. You're trying to tone your numbers better. And if you, let's say you're in a speed run and you get like a 4-second time save is discovered, and you have a faster PB, which means you're a better player, and it's very easy to do. So you're a better player, you have a faster PB. That's good, but that 4 seconds isn't going to scale. So simply getting an advantage like that is cool, but like it doesn't really matter. It's not going to do anything for you long term. Okay, so there's another aspect to this. Understanding that saving 4 seconds in a speedrun effectively for free is a huge deal. It's a very, very big deal. Understanding that matters a lot. Like that would come down to my value system. I would say a worse player or a much worse player, even, because this isn't a an on or off switch. Like I would say, let's say I'm a 10 out of 10 on speedrunning. Let's say you have a 2 out of 10 player and an 8 out of 10 player. I would say I understand how valuable speed is in a speedrun more than the 8 out of 10 player and the 2 out of 10 player. So even if you're 9 out of 10 player or you're 10 out of 10 player like me, you can still get better at this stuff or understand it more. So I would say, like, let's say a 4-second glitch comes out or a time save comes out. So if you understand the game's value very well, the value system of the game very well, like in speedrun, for example, you're going to jump on that 4-second time save immediately, which means you can start immediately implementing it. And then there's also smaller details like understanding how to do the mechanics, understanding how to pick it up, how to implement it into your run. There's a lot of these more subtle details within a game's value system, right? This is not an on and off switch. It's not a linear thing. Learning a game's value system is a lifetime thing, right? It takes your entire career, and it's super important to understand that optimally, or understand it the best you can, as early as you can, because when you learn a game, how good you are when you learn it is how good you're going to get. So let me write that down. Okay, so this point is insanely important. How good you understand a game is how good you're going to get. So let's again look at gameplay a little bit more objectively. Let's take out player skill. Let's take out all this like nonsense mentalities. Take out all that stuff that you can't really break down. You can't really objectively analyze. Let's simply look at the numbers behind the game. So let's say you understand a game like at a 50% level compared to a top player. Now that doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't matter. This is an example. So you understand a game at like 50% and you play the game for 10,000 hours. You're going to get very, very, very good at that specific way to play the game. So the reason you can't learn a game there's no such thing as knowing a game at 50% is because, like, let's say in a speed run, you don't value speed. Instead, you really value swag, or you really highly value difficulty within a trick. Let's say you highly value difficulty within a trick, or you highly value optimizing like the beginning of the run or something. So let's say you play for 10,000 hours. You're going to get good at valuing those two things. You're not going to get good at other things. Now, what if those other things have way more value within the game? So let's say you go into a speed run and you are pretty lazy and you're pretty uninspired and you don't really care about the game, but you really understand what's important to the speedrun, like the specific qualities of the speedrun that make it that gain value from it, right? And then you play it for X amount of hours. You're gonna quickly get good at it because you know exactly what is good and bad and what to look for, and then you can capitalize on it. And actually, it brings up another point as well. It means that it creates limitations, and this is part of the natural gameplay argument of why value systems are so important. Okay, so point 4, value creates limitations. This is insanely valuable. This is an insanely valuable point, and the reason for this is because in natural reality, you can only be doing one thing at a time. And so let's say there's 2 options available and you can't discern between which is good and which is bad. Which one should you do? Because you can't do both. So in a speedrun or in a video game, this is constantly happening like rapid fire. And oftentimes it's not even like a fork in the road. It's just, well, like let's say a match of Super Smash Bros. Melee starts. What do, right? You don't know exactly what to do. And so usually you just do whatever your body tells you to do. Even that is suboptimal. Once you have value, what it does is it creates limitations. It creates restrictions because certain things are better than other things. Certain things are bad. So like, let's say you don't know if I should go for the swag movement or should I try to take it seriously and get a good run, right? I don't know what to do. Well, once you start to understand the value better, suddenly the swag movement loses value, right? In fact, it becomes a thing where it's like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this. It's a bad option. And it's interesting about these value systems because it's not just one thing. Again, I'm really trying to stress here, like value systems. It's not an on-off switch, and it's not one or two or 10 things. When you're creating value within a game, if you play for like 1,000 or 5,000 hours, there's hundreds or there's thousands of little details or techniques or things that have value or values created or shifted. So there's some obvious stuff like in a speed run, saving a second is big. Time is better. Time is your ideal. There's some really obvious stuff, but there's also the subtle stuff. And when you go into a game like Melee or League of Legends or where they're more complex, you need to really understand what decision is optimal, why it's optimal, and then you need to be able to do it and with confidence. If you can do it with confidence, then you're going to have much cleaner gameplay and you're going to get better numbers. And it's also going to scale more. It's going to be easier to execute, easier to implement in your strategies, easier to say, hey, this is good. It's going to be easier to react on, like, let's say something new happens and you're like, oh, I don't know exactly what to do. Well, if you have a very, very clear, clean value system, what's going to happen is that new thing comes in, either an opponent does a new strategy or some new thing is discovered. You can immediately know how to react to it. You can say if it's good or bad, say why it's good or bad. It's very easy to organize it, which is, what does that do? It helps the decision-making process. It really is going to help out the decision-making process. So value systems are insanely important to understand. And I'm going to put a fifth note here, guys. Okay, this fifth note is really important. Understanding the game's value system is going to take a very long time to learn and master. That is, I want to hammer that home, mostly for the motivation factor. I was playing Teamfight Tactics last night, actually, and that's kind of a new game for me. And I was doing really well, and I've been really picking that game up really fast recently. But it's that game and genre, it's completely new to me. And I did play Magic the Gathering a little bit in high school, but ultimately that's not really doing a whole lot, and the game is just completely new to me. So it's interesting to play Teamfight Tactics and relearn the game, or like learn a completely new game. And there's a lot of little things that I'm learning that have value within the game. I'll just bullet point a few of them. So one thing is not dropping your HP to 0. That has a lot of value. What does that do? It means that getting ahead early is really important. Because the only rule within Teamfight Tactics, there's 8 players and they all have 100 HP, and it's kind of a drafting type game where you get these champions and they're basically cards and you make them really strong. And so everybody has 100 HP, and if you go below 100, you lose. That's the only condition for losing. There's no other condition for losing. So what has value within the game now? Having above 0 HP. It doesn't matter if you have 1 or 100 HP. Like, there's no difference. So let's say you have 1 HP, it's a lot easier to die. So suddenly having higher HP does matter more. It's more helpful. But fundamentally, there's really no difference between 1 and 100 at the end of the game. So let's say in a game like Teamfight Tactics, you want to win the game, but you don't need 100 HP at the end of the game. And another thing is, the game is basically on a clock because 2 people play each other every game. There's 8 players, and people battle at the end of each turn, like in pairs of 2, which means that the game's effectively on a clock. Like it can't go on forever. Some games like Magic the Gathering or League of Legends even, or Melee, it could go on forever. That can't happen in Teamfight Tactics. So assembling a team that's like unbeatable isn't really it loses value. In Teamfight Tactics, I think a lot of people might think assembling an unbeatable team has a lot of value, because if you have an unbeatable team, you win. The thing is, if you assemble an unbeatable team, unless it's completely broken mechanic, which they'll just take that out of the game, you're wasting a lot of time, you're wasting a lot of resources into an unbeatable team, and then you're also not using your resources. Like if you assemble an unbeatable team, well, guess what? You're not even using your HP anymore. Like I think that might work at super low levels, or even mid, or even high levels. If you're or if you get very good RNG, sure, you might get an unbeatable team, or you might never lose HP. But realistically, and especially if you're trying to fine tune the numbers to abuse every little advantage of the game, you should use that. You should use your HP pool, and so you don't need an unbeatable team, right? So suddenly we've created and we've shifted value just in a conversation in the past few minutes. We've created and shifted value in how you approach teamfight tactics, or how I approach teamfight tactics, right? So two things. One, I don't need to get way ahead of my opponents, right? So let's say the game starts. I don't want to get blown up immediately. Now, if they change teamfight tactics, because they will change it in the future, and it makes it so getting more gold early on is better, then that'll have more value, right? But right now, that doesn't have as much value. What has a lot of value right now is staying ahead, not getting far behind, and then you don't need to be super far ahead of an opponent. You want to just be slightly far ahead of everyone else, right? Because if you're just slightly far ahead, it seems like technically you would have more. It's more efficient, right? So that's a hypothesis on my end. I don't actually know if that's a true statement necessarily, but this is kind of the point of learning these value systems. Is it's effectively impossible to know. A lot of it is creating a hypothesis and then experimenting with that over a long period of time. And if you're right, you're going to win, and you're going to win a lot. And so really critically thinking about the game, playing the game a lot, looking at what works and doesn't work constantly is super helpful, because that hypothesis I just made right now, guess what? I was testing that last night. I'm going to be testing that in the future. I'm going to be testing that out until either it's bad or it's not good, or I make a colossal failure and then I'll get more information, or maybe I win by a lot and I realize, oh, this really works, or I watch a tournament stream. These constantly ways to learn, and that's why I think figuring out these value systems and trying to really critically think about this stuff, it's going to accelerate your gameplay. It's going to actually get you to become a top player. Okay, guys, I have a lot of people that play Smash Ultimate and Smash Brothers Melee that watch me, and I think Melee and Ultimate is like one of the coolest games because the gameplay is non-linear. It's very non-linear. It's very simple and clean, yet it's extraordinarily deep. In fact, you can basically never stop getting good at this game and like beating top players. Like if you look at power scaling in Melee, the top players are like basically impossible to get to. You'll never get to their skill level. But how do they get to their skill level, and how do they do it rather quickly? Because they understand the game's value very, 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 very well. And so they can immediately determine this strategy is good, this strategy is bad, why this situation is good, right? This movement is good, this situation is bad. There's a lot of these little complex things that they've determined that have a high value or are relevant to the game, and therefore they create strategies and create we'll just call it atmosphere around that value, which creates strategies, it creates situations, it creates like their tendencies towards that type of stuff, and then they end up excelling way over the second place player. So I want to go back to point number 2. Learning the game's value system scales over a long period of time. So I guess I should actually change that point. It shouldn't be scales over a long period of time. It should be scales your power level effectively. Okay, guys, I put 2 points down here. The first one is a 10-second time save. Actually, hold on. A 10-second time save is only going to get you so far, but 40 15-frame time saves make you a better player. And if you notice, 40 times 15 frames is the same as 10 seconds. They're both 600 frames. So why would you be a better player if you have 40 15-frame time saves versus a singular 10-second time save? So technically, I would argue you're not a better player. You are, based on where they are, and there's a bunch of other factors. Like if both runs went down 600 frames, they would be the same run in my opinion. But there's more factors. Now, the reason this is because if you found 40 15-frame time saves, most likely it was due to understanding the game better. And when you do that, you're gonna be able to find more time saves in the future based on the past, right? So it's like, oh, I found this is why I can save. Oh, I can save like seven frames entering this doorway because of this technique. It's easier, it's more efficient, and it's on average just a few frames faster. Well, suddenly there's like 15 more places you can do that. And then like 2 months later, you find another 15. And then a new glitch comes out and you have to do this room differently. And suddenly you can implement it again. So that time save is going to scale, where just saving 10 seconds in one room is like, it's great, but it's not going to scale. So earlier I was talking about a 10-second time save is kind of irrelevant if you're trying to actually become a top player. Now, I don't think that's entirely true, because let's say you understood the game very well and you noticed there was a 10-second time save and then you jumped on that. And you had a worse player who was simply parroting me. And he said he's like a parrot. And he was saying, well, 10-second time save is not that valuable. So he doesn't care. He doesn't invest his time into it. Well, he's not critically thinking, right? Because if you are able to recognize that a 10-second time save is very valuable and then immediately implement your gameplay, guess what? You're actually becoming you're effectively a better player. It's a reflection that you're a better player, right? So I think understanding that is important. But the point of number 2 is that, like, let's say in Melee, for example, let's look at Melee. It's a little bit cleaner. Or League of Legends is a good example. If you're trying to get like a world record in a game, like in whatever game in speedrunning, I think it's pretty easy. But let's say you're trying to get like rank 1 in Melee, or like rank 1 in League of Legends, or rank 1 in like Fortnite. I mean this is like way harder. There's way more players. The mechanics are a lot more they're a lot like more open, easier, which means more people are doing it, people are mastering it. The metagame's constantly evolving. It's like insanely fast, quickly evolving. So it's a lot harder to get good at games like that. So if you simply find one thing that works and great, or you simply find a flat upgrade to your gameplay, it's not really relevant. It's not going to level you up. Like if you found thousands of those flat upgrades, it's not going to do anything for you. If you can find multiplicative upgrades, or like scalable upgrades, you're going to get good at the game quickly, because you're going to be making the right decisions, and making a good decision is going to do way more for you than like having some random upgrade. So like, let's look at a game like League of Legends, and let's say you make a good decision versus a bad decision. It could be like the difference of like 2,000 damage in a team fight, or like 6,000 damage in a team fight, which will completely swing a team fight. Which means the whole team will win a team fight. Which means you'll get the Baron, or get more towers, which is more gold. I mean, it's a considerable amount of more gold. Your team's mentality is good too. And this can win you the game. Like, let's look at a game like Melee. Let's say you make 3 good decisions in a row versus making 1.5 good decisions in a row. You're just flipping coins. That's a stock. That's potentially a whole stock. Or it's potentially 2 stocks, right? I mean, this is an insane swing. In Melee, I think this is interesting. Scale that out. Let's say you make 5% more decisions correctly, and then 1,000 things happen in Melee. You know, this actually has potential for improvement. Where let's say in Melee, you start out with 50%, or the opponent has 50% rather. Like, you started the game out and the opponent has an extra 50%, right? You have an undeniable advantage, but I mean, this doesn't matter versus top players. Like, this is irrelevant versus top players, because at every decision for you between them, they're going to make it correctly, like X% more often. You know, 1% more often, 10% more often, 30% more often. You can't compete with that. Maybe over one hit you could. You know, maybe if the goal is to get a player to 60%, and the opponent started with 50%, and he's a top player, you'd have it's like you could see somebody betting money that you could beat that pro to 60%. But let's say it was a 4-star game. Let's say it's a 100-star game. You can't win. So a lot of times when you're going for the first place in a lot of these more popular games, or you're playing the long run, it's harder, but it's only harder because it takes more self-reflection. It takes more looking inside yourself and really looking at the game and like trying to figure out what is good and bad and understand the game's value system. Once you start to understand the game's value system, you can start making better decisions, and those better decisions over a very long period of time, both within the game and with learning the game, they're going to give you way more advantages than simply somebody telling you a trick and you're like, oh cool, I'm a better player. That's great, and everything matters, but if you can understand, like in a speedrun, how important it is to save 1 frame, or how important it is to save like 30 frames, that's going to multiplicatively make you perform so much better than any kind of flat time save or flat upgrade to your gameplay. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching my first video on the WQ world, the natural world. You guys are one step closer to becoming Alpha Gamer. Anyway, let me know in the Discord what games you play, what your goals are, where you are with the goals, where you are with the game, how long you've been playing. Honestly, any kind of Q&A, any kind of questions. Honestly, also any kind of anxieties. This is a goal meeting group, and I think being honest with your goals and with yourself and with your anxieties is pretty important. So feel free to do that too. But yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Keep it real and stay gaming, guys.